Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar on charts and interactive dashboards in Excel. I can see we've got a few people logged on at the moment. We did have quite a few register, so hopefully some more will join as we start to go through. It's lovely to be back with you all, and I hope the weather where you is a lot nicer than it is here in London today. I don't think it's stopped raining all day, which is a little bit depressing. So if you can hear any rain in the background, that is why. Unfortunately, nothing I can do about that, but hopefully it won't thunder. Now, for those of you who are new to our webinars, I'll just briefly introduce myself. So my name is Deb Ashby, and I'm an IT trainer, and I specialize in the design, delivery, and facilitation of Microsoft training, both in the classroom and online. And I'm going to be hosting this session for you today. Now, if you are new to our webinars, then I will just run through a little bit of admin first off. So this webinar will run for an hour and it's going to be a live demonstration. So we are going to jump into Excel and run through everything related to charts and interactive dashboards. I will also point out we're using today a new piece of webinar software, and we've both got our fingers crossed that nothing bad is going to happen and everything's going to go smoothly. But just to let you know, this is a new piece of software that we're using today. I am joined on the call, as always, by Adam Lacey from Simon Says It, and he's going to be keeping an eye on the chat panel, which you'll see is over to the right-hand side of the screen. So if you have any questions in relation to the logistics of the webinar, then please feel free to type into the chat and Adam can help you with that. Now, with regards to questions related to the content, so what I'm going to be running through today, I'm going to leave some time at the end for you to ask those questions, as it is a little bit difficult for me to manage whilst I'm training the content. Now, the files I'm using will be dropped into chat. So Adam, if you have that file, if you could drop that into the chat for me, so that everyone can download that, and you can use that if you want to practice the skills that you've learned. So this session is also being recorded and we will make that recording available to you. So you'll have basically everything you need to run through this session again. So
that should
with
be in
all
there now, Debs, just to let
wonderful.
you know. So in the chat box, there should be a little thing saying interactive dashboards.xlsx. If you just download that, everyone, you'll be able to follow along. Debs, just hit the little hide button on your at the bottom of your screen. I
always forget
again.
that. Yeah. Thank you. I forget that every single week.
No worries. I'll leave you to it. Any questions, guys, drop them into the chat as normal.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, let's jump across. This is just a brief agenda of what we're going to cover today. So I'm going to speak to you a little bit, first of all, about what exactly is an interactive dashboard. It might be something that you've heard. They've become quite popular over the last few years, but it might be that you're not entirely sure what they are or what that actually means. So I'll just briefly explain right at the beginning. I'm going to show you an example of a dashboard. So I'm going to show you straight at the front of the session exactly what we're going to be creating. We're then going to go through and we're going to create some pivot tables and some pivot charts. My favorite thing in Excel. I do love a pivot table, and I'm going to show you how you can format those pivot charts as well. And then we're going to spend some time designing and assembling an interactive dashboard. And we're going to do things like add slices and timelines and, of course, all of the charts that we create. And then right at the end, I'm going to show you how you can very, very quickly and easily just update all of the data on your dashboard with the click of one button. It's pretty amazing. And then, of course, at the end, we will leave some time for any questions that you have. So that is the agenda for today. Now, as I said, I just want to deal with that first question before we jump into Excel, which is, what is an interactive dashboard? Well, a lot of us deal with large amounts of data in Excel, and what's become very prevalent over the last few years is the ability to be able to display that data in an engaging way and make it a lot more visual so that it's easier for people to interpret and understand. And I'll show you what I mean by that. this is just a screenshot, but this is what we're going to be creating. So this is an example dashboard. And what you see here is by no means the only way that you can create a dashboard. You can design it however you like. So you might look at that and think, oh, I don't like that, or it doesn't fit with my company colors. Don't worry about that. It's just an example. You can design it however you like. But this is what we're going to be creating today. So what I've got here is basically an example of sales data. So it might be that I'm a sales rep and I need to do some kind of presentation to my managers or stakeholders that clearly shows how well the company is doing based on various different metrics. And what I've got here is a whole bunch of charts, and you can see that these are actually created via pivot tables. So we create the pivot table and then we create a chart off of that. And I've just arranged them onto a dashboard, and I've added a bit of design to it. So we're going to go through some of the design elements just to make it really visual, really engaging. And I hope you agree that that actually is quite a nice way to display data. What you'll also see here is that I've added some what we call slices down the left-hand side. And these are essentially like filters. So it makes the dashboard interactive. I can go in and click on various different things, and all of my charts are going to update to reflect that. Now, the really great thing about interactive dashboards is that once you set them up correctly, it becomes extremely easy to update them with any new data. So, next month I might have a whole new set of sales figures. I can add them in very simply and update everything on my dashboard with the click of one button. So it's a really efficient way of working. So that's what we're going to do in this session. I'm going to recreate this example, and I'm going to show you how I created all of these charts using pivot tables and also how I designed this dashboard. Okay, so as I said, this is one of a whole host of ways that you can create dashboards. So enough talking, let's get down to business. I'm going to switch into Excel. And the first thing I want to do is just explain to you the data that I'm using. So I have this tab here, it says data, and this basically displays, it's a snapshot of sales information for two tech stores. So we have Computech and we have Micro World. These are fictional, I've just made them up, so don't go Googling for these two stores because they don't exist. And this is sales information across various different towns in the UK, whereas if you can't tell already, that is where I am based. So we have the month, we have the store, town, we have store code, country, the manager, category, and then some sales figures. And this is the data that we're going to use to build out our dashboard. Now, I will say that when it comes to creating pivot tables, which is what we're going to do next, it's a good idea to make sure that your data is what we call clean, first of all. Now, I've already cleaned up this data because there can be quite a lot to cleaning data, and I didn't want to take up a lot of this session going through that. It is a webinar that we've run previously, so if you're interested in all the different ways that you can clean up data, then I would definitely check that out. You can find that on YouTube, I believe, Adam. Or maybe on the website as well.
And, it's on the blog, and I think it's on the YouTube channel as well. Data cleaning in Excel. It's very good, actually, guys. If you want to learn how to prep your data properly and how to get it out of a kind of messy tangle that often data arrives in from exported CSVs, then it's an essential watch.
Absolutely agree. So I've basically got my data to a clean state. So everything's consistent. I don't have any blank rows, spelling errors, anything along those lines. I've also made sure that my formatting is correct. So if I highlight column A, which is the month, and if I look up in my number formatting area, you can see that that's correctly formatted as a date. And the same thing with the sales column, I have that correctly formatted as currency. So you just want to make sure you have the correct formatting applied as well. Now, what we're going to do with this data is we're going to create some pivot tables. Now, this step is very important. I'm going to do a Control A, which is the shortcut key to highlight all of my data. And I'm going to put my data into a table. So on the Home ribbon, I'm going to go over to the Styles group and I'm going to click the Format as Table drop down. And you can select any one of these styles. It doesn't really matter. Now I'm going to choose this one just here. And you'll see it's asking me, where is your data? And I can see by my marching ants that it's picked up my data. Because I highlighted it all, I can see the range there. I'm also saying that my table has headers, which it does, and I'm going to click OK. So my data is now in a table, and I can tell it's in a table because it will automatically get these little filter buttons at the top of each columns. And also, if you look up to your ribbons, you'll see that you now have this additional, what we call a contextual ribbon. So it says Table Tools. And on this ribbon, I have all of my controls and buttons to control the design and the functionality of this table. So now my data is in a table, and it will become very apparent to you a bit later on why it's important that you do this step. If you don't put your data in a table, when you add more data, you won't be able to automatically update all your dashboard if you don't have the data in a table. Okay, so a really important step. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to name my table. So in this first group here where it says table name, currently says table 1, I'm going to call this sales underscore data. And again, you can call this whatever you like. Remember to hit the enter key just to fix that name. Now, when it comes to naming things like tables, you can't have any spaces. So I can't have a space between sales and data. It either has to be one word or separated with underscores. So now I have my data in a table, my table is named, I'm going to create my first pivot table. And if I jump across to our example dashboard, because this is what we're aiming for, the first one I'm going to create is actually this pie chart just here. So where it says sales by store. Okay, so let's go back to our data. I'm going to go to the insert ribbon and I'm going to select pivot table, which is the first one on that ribbon. And you can see here we've got the Create Pivot Table dialog box, and it's automatically picked up that I'm using the table range sales underscore data. So it knows where my data is because I've named it. I then need to choose where I want to put this pivot table, and I have new worksheet highlighted. I always like to put mine on a new worksheet. You could choose an existing worksheet if you wanted to, but I'm just going to stick with new, and I'm going to click on OK. And what this does, you'll see now I have a new blank sheet at the bottom which says sheet 1. And I'm actually going to rename this just by right-clicking and selecting rename. And I'm going to call this sales by store. I like to keep everything neat and tidy. And I'm actually just going to drag that across to there. So now, if you've never used pivot tables before, I think people tend to get the idea that they're really, really difficult, and they're actually not. They're actually super easy once you understand them. So currently what I have here is, this is essentially a blank pivot table. Now on the right-hand side, what you'll see here is pivot table fields, and these fields you can see listed are basically all of those column headings from my data. So we have month, store, town, store code, so on and so forth. So it's automatically picked those up and put them into this little area for me to use. Underneath that, I have 4 blank fields. And what I can do is just drag and drop these fields down into any one of these 4 areas to build up my pivot table. Now, the way that you do this really depends on what you're trying to, how you're trying to view your data. So in this example, I want to see all of the sales by store. Okay, so I'm going to grab the store field, which is this one just here, and I'm just going to drag it and I'm going to drop it into rows. And you'll see as soon as I do that, I now have both of my stores, so Computech and Microworld, listed in my rows. But now I want to see the sales data for that. So I'm going to grab sales and I'm going to put it down into values. And you can see now very quickly I've been able to see what the total amount of sales are for Computech and the total amount of sales for Microworld. Okay, now the wonderful thing about pivot tables is that you can just drag and drop these around to whichever area you want to get your pivot table to display in a different way. Now I'm going to keep it in rows for the time being. So I have my pivot table and I'm looking at this now where it says sum of sales. I don't particularly like the way these numbers are formatted. So I haven't got a currency symbol and I'm not really sure about these decimal places. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to go into value field settings. And at the bottom here, I have number format. And this should look reasonably familiar to you. It's just the format cells dialog. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to change it to currency format. I'm going to take my decimal places down to 0. And it's given me a US dollars symbol. And that's because I actually have my PC set to US dollars because I do a lot of courses for US-based clients. But in this case, I'm going to change it to British pounds, which I can never find. There we go, in this list, just to keep everything consistent. And there we go. So you can now see that that formatting has been changed and it looks a slightly nicer. So now I have that, I'm going to create my pie chart. So I want to make sure that I'm clicked in my pivot table, and you can see that I have pivot table tools at the top. I'm going to click the Analyze ribbon and we have a pivot chart option just here. And this is where you can go in and we have a whole host of different types of chart that you can create. So for this one, I want a pie chart and I'm going to click on OK. And there we go. There is our pie chart. So this is my first chart and there's going to be some editing that I want to do to this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this and think, okay, what don't I need? What's confusing this chart a little bit? Now, I don't really like these grey buttons on here. Now, you might like these. They are basically filters which will allow you to, if you just want to see the information for Computech, which is a bit pointless in this case, then you can use those filters. But for this particular chart, I don't particularly need these grey buttons, so I'm going to get rid of them by right-clicking and going to Hide All Field Buttons on Chart, like so. I'm now going to give my chart a title. So this chart title is basically just a text box. So I can double click in there and I'm going to say Sales by Store. And another thing I might want to do is I've got my legend just here, or my key, as we used to call them when I was at school. And you can move the position of this legend as well. You'll see next to your chart, when you're clicked on your chart, you do have these 2 additional buttons, and one of them is a plus. And this enables you to control the position of your legend. So I'm going to say I want to move that to the bottom, and it puts it underneath like so. So that pie chart looks pretty good. I'm going to make that a bit smaller, just drag that in. And the final thing I want to do is I'm just going to change the color because I'm going to have a blue theme running throughout my dashboard. So I'm going to go up to my design ribbon and I'm going to go to change colors. And if I scroll down, I'm just going to pick this one just here. And again, the choice is completely yours. So there is my first chart. And if we look back at our example, you can see that looks pretty similar to what we have just there. Okay, so that is our first one. We're going to do pretty much the same for the other 3 charts. So let's jump back to our pie chart. Now, the second chart I'm going to do is sales by manager. And what I find is if I'm creating a lot of pivot tables and pivot charts, instead of starting all the way from the beginning again by going back to data and insert pivot table, the thing I find easiest to do is just to copy this tab. So where I've got sales by store at the bottom, I'm going to hold down my control key and I'm just going to drag and drop. And it makes a copy of that worksheet. I'm going to right click and I'm going to rename and I'm going to do sales by manager, like so. So now we're going to redisplay our pivot table. So I'm going to get rid of this chart just by deleting it. And I'm going to click in my pivot table. So now what I want to display is the sales by manager. So at the moment we have sales by store. So all I need to do is remove store from rows by dragging it outside. And I'm going to select the manager field and I'm going to put that down into rows. And you can see how that now changes. I have all of my manager names and the total amount of sales for those managers. Now, sometimes you'll have quite a lot of data listed in here. And if you're going to create a chart, if you've got a lot of data, so if I had hundreds of managers, sometimes that type of data doesn't display too well on a chart. It's going to look too busy or a bit too crazy. So what you can do is you can filter things out. So it might be that the information I want to present is maybe just the top 10 managers. So what I can do is I can right click and I can go to filter and I can say top 10. And you can see here it's going to filter for the top 10 items by the sum of sales. So based on the sales amount, it's going to give me the top 10 managers. So if I click on OK, there we go. I now have a much more manageable list. What I could also do is then sort the sales. So I could go to sort and I could do largest to smallest, smallest to largest if I wanted to. So I can see there that Spencer Lee was basically our top manager with the most sales. So now I'm happy with the way that my data is looking. I'm going to go in and create another pivot chart. So I'm going to go up to Analyze, across to Pivot Chart, and this one I'm going to do in a bar chart like so, and click on OK. And there we go. Now things are a little bit squashed up down here, so I'm just going to resize this chart. Whoops, not that much. Can get a little bit out of control, so let's move that in ever so slightly. And once again, I'm going to get rid of these grey buttons. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to say hide all field buttons on chart. I'm going to change the chart title again. So double click in the text box and I'm going to say sales by manager. And really, when I look at this chart, I don't really need my legend because it's just showing the total. So this legend is kind of a little bit pointless. So I'm actually going to remove that just by clicking the plus and unticking where it says legend. And then the final thing for me to do is just my stylistic change. So just change the color. So I'm going to go back to design. I'm going to go to change colors. And again, we're just going to make it that same color scheme. So there, very quickly, I have my second pivot chart, which is showing me the top 10 managers. Now, I will say, when you look at this, if you look at the chart, it actually displays them in the opposite order to what you actually have in the pivot table, which I always find is a little bit strange. I have Googled this many times as to why it does that, and I haven't come up with a sufficient answer yet. So if anybody knows the answer to that, I would be all ears. But if you wanted this chart to display the other way around, you would just need to go in and sort the other way, and essentially it will put the top one at the top. So it works a little bit strange. All right, so there is our second table, and let's refer back to our example again. And the top one there is sales by manager. Okay. All right, now the next one we're going to do is sales by category. So again, I'm going to do the same process. I'm going to copy this tab by holding down my control key and dragging and dropping. I'm going to right click, rename sales by category, like so. I'm going to delete out the current chart. I'm going to click in my pivot table and I'm going to rearrange my fields. So I'm going to remove manager out of rows. So we'll just take that out. And I'm going to put store down into rows. And I'm also going to grab category and I'm going to put that underneath store. So this is showing you a different way that you can organize your data. So you can have more than one field in an area down here. So I now have store and category in rows, and you can see how that affects the way that my pivot table is displayed. So it's now being sorted by, we've got the store at the top, and then we have all of the categories, and then we have a subtotal, and then we have the second store, all of the categories, and a grand total at the bottom. Now for this particular table, I'm not interested in the grand total, so I'm going to turn that off. And you can turn off subtotals and grand totals, again, by going up to your Analyze ribbon. Oh, sorry, not Analyze, Design. And in this first group, you have a subtotals and a grand totals button. So I'm going to click grand totals and I'm going to say turn off for rows and columns, which gets rid of that grand total at the bottom. I'm also going to, should I turn off subtotals? No, I'll keep those on for the time being. Now, I could, again, move these fields around. I could move category to columns to get it to display in a completely different way. But for the time being, I'm going to keep it like this. I'm now going to create my pivot chart. So up to Analyze, click Pivot Chart, and I'm going to do another bar chart. Click on OK. Now this one's slightly different to the ones that we've done previously because we have store and category in there. You can see the way that the pivot chart is displaying those. So we have store just here and then the categories within. Now, I might look at this pivot chart and think, I'm not actually sure I like the way that that's laid out. To me, it would make more sense to have Computech and Microworld in the legend as opposed to kind of running down the side. So I'm going to take the store and I'm going to move that field across to legend. And to me, that looks a little bit better. It's a little bit cleaner and easier to see. So don't be afraid to have an experiment and move these fields around. I'm going to go through the same process of turning off these or hiding these field buttons. And I'm going to widen my chart out just a little bit. This one needs to go a bit longer, I think, just so that those values aren't overlapping at the bottom. And I'm going to give my chart a title. Now let me just close down this panel. I'm going to click on the plus and I'm going to say chart title. And in here, I'm going to say sales by category. And then finally, we're just going to change the color. So back to change colors. And I'm going to select the color scheme that I've been using throughout. So there is our third pivot chart. And if we glance back at our example, we now have sales by manager, sales by store, and sales by category done. And we need to do this final one just here. So let's go back to sales by category. Same process, hold down Control key, drag and drop. I'm going to right click, I'm going to rename, and this one I'm going to do sales by month. Like so. And you're probably used to this now. We're going to go in and we're going to delete out that current chart. I'm going to click in my pivot table. Now, if when you click in your pivot table, you don't get that panel appear on the right-hand side, you can very simply bring that back just by going up to your Analyze ribbon and making sure in this show group at the end, you have field list turned on. That will bring that pivot table fields panel back again. Now this time we're going to do a very simple one. I'm going to get rid of category out of rows and I'm going to keep store in columns and I'm going to put month in rows this time, like so. Now what you might see is when I've moved month down there, it's actually divided it into months and month. And if I look at my pivot table, you can see I have my months, but I also have a plus next to each of these. So if I click the plus, it's actually showing me the individual days as well. Now, I'm not interested in the individual days. I'm just interested in the totals for the particular months. So I'm going to remove that month from the pivot table. So now it gets rid of those individual days and just leaves me with the months. So now I'm going to do a chart. Up to Analyze, over to Pivot Chart, and we're going to do a column chart this time. And there we go. So again, you can resize this if you want to. Again, I'm going to hide these field buttons. I'm going to keep my legend just there, that's fine, but I am going to add a chart title. And we're going to call this Sales by Month. Like so. And I need to change the color. Almost forgot there. Let's go to design, change the color. And there we go. So now essentially what I've done there reasonably quickly is I've created 4 different pivot tables showing the data in a slightly different way. And I've created 4 corresponding pivot charts. Now, once we've done this, we can then start to build up our dashboard because what we're basically doing is we're aiming for something which looks a bit like this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a new tab. So I'm just going to click on this plus at the bottom, which gives me a new sheet. I'm going to right click and I'm going to select rename, and we're going to call this dashboard. Oops, I'm not very good at spelling today, it has to be said. There we go. I'm actually just going to move that next to my pivot charts. So now this is where it gets interesting, and this is where you can really kind of let your creativity flourish. You can really design your dashboard in whichever way you want, and there are some amazing dashboard designs available online. If this is something that interests you and you want to start creating some really whizzy looking dashboards, I would recommend you jump onto YouTube or even just jump onto Google, or something like Pinterest amazingly has lots of different ways that people have designed dashboards, and some of them look so stunning, really nice ways of presenting your data. Mine is fairly straightforward, if I'm honest with you. But I'm just going to show you some of the elements of how I designed this. So the first thing I did was I went up to my insert ribbon and I just drew a big shape. So we're going to go to our shapes button just here, and I'm going to select the rectangle shape. And I'm just going to draw a big old rectangle, and we can resize this if it's not large enough, on my page. And that yellow is a bit bright for me. I'm going to go up to my shape fill, and I'm going to fill that with just a darker color, so kind of a almost black kind of a color. I can also see that I've kind of got an orange border around the outside of this, so I'm going to remove the shape outline. So I'm just going to say no outline. Now that I have the base of my dashboard, I'm going to add my dashboard title. So I'm going to go to the insert ribbon. I'm going to go all the way over to text, and I'm just going to add a text box. I'm going to draw my text box, which you might not be able to see too well at the moment. And I'm going to call this, or give it a title of Sales Dashboard. And I'm going to say this is for data from January to June 2017. I'm just going to make a few formatting changes to this. So I want to make my title a little bit bigger. So we can just adjust that out a little bit. And I'm just going to resize this text box very slightly. And what I want to do is, again, on my Format tab, I'm going to remove that white fill. And I'm going to change the shape outline to a blue color, so it kind of matches the overall theme that we have going on here. And I'm going to change the text to white, like so. And then I'm going to move that just up to the corner, like so. So now we have our title in there. The next thing I want to do is I want to kind of map out or allow some space for the slices that I'm going to add a little bit later. So if we refer back to our example, when I say slices, I mean these little panels that we have running down the left-hand side. So these are like little filters which control your dashboard. And I'm going to add those in at the end, but what I want to do is make sure that I leave some room for them. So I generally, again, you don't have to do this, but I like to just map out a little bit of space just by, again, drawing a rectangle where those slices are going to go. So they're probably going to be about that big. I'm just going to change the color of that box. So that sort of shows me, when I'm putting my charts onto here, how much space I need to leave for those slices. Then it's a very simple case of just copying and pasting all of those charts into your dashboard. So I'm going to go back to the first one we created, which was our pie chart. I'm going to select it and I'm going to copy it. So you can right click and select copy, or keyboard shortcut Control C. I'm going to go back to my dashboard and I'm going to Control V to paste. Oops. Now, don't worry too much at the moment where these are being placed. I just want to get them all onto the dashboard first of all. So I'm going to go to Sales by Manager. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to copy it, Control C. And I'm going to Control V to paste. I'm going to go to Sales by Category. Control C to copy. Control V to paste. And then finally, sales by month, Control C to copy, Control V to paste. So once we have them all on there, and I'm just going to close down this pivot chart field so we have some more room, you can really place these where you like. And sometimes this can be a little bit fiddly. Let me just refer back to my example so I know what order I put them in. So we had sales by manager at the top. Okie dokes. So I'm just going to move these around a little bit. And there we go, sales by manager. I'm going to move these around. As I said, just bear with me while I get these into a nice logical order. So I'm just going to drag these out, make these a bit wider. And I'm going to put, let's see, sales by store. It's going to go underneath. I might want to make that a little bit taller and also a little bit thinner. And what did I have next to that? Sales by category. All right, so I want to put my sales by category in there. And again, just to make things neat, I'm just going to try and get these as lined up as possible. And you might have to drag your canvas down as well, or your shape, just to give it a little bit more room, which is absolutely fine. And I'm going to put this final one running across the bottom. So I'm just going to put it under there. I'm just going to have a big long sales by month across the bottom. Again, as I said, you can arrange these however you like. And just because I am a little bit OCD, I'm going to make that a little bit longer. There we go. So everything's all nicely lined up. All right, so once you've placed your charts where you want them to be, I'm going to do a little bit of formatting. I don't particularly like the way these look with this white background. It doesn't really go with my overall theme. So I'm going to click on my first chart. I'm going to go up to the format ribbon at the top here. I'm going to say shape fill, and I'm going to say no fill, which will remove that white background. As soon as we do that, you can see that my labels are now a little bit hard to see. So with the chart still selected, I'm going to go to home and I'm just going to change the font to white. And they're a lot easier to see now. I'm going to do exactly the same for the rest of these. So I'm going to select my sales by store, up to format, no fill, change the font color to white, and just bear with me while I do the other two. So no fill, font color is white, and then the final one at the bottom, format, shape fill, no fill, and finally, font is white. So you can see how this is now coming together. Now, if I look at this and the way it's organized currently, this isn't too bad. So we've got sales by manager, fairly easy to see, sales by store, yeah. I can see sales by category and sales by store. I have my legend for both of these. I also have a legend for sales by month. Now, I don't really need to have a legend on each chart. What I could do instead is put what I would call a universal legend at the top. So I'm going to get rid of these. I'm going to click on the text box. I'm just going to get rid of them. And just going to delete them out. Remember, they are just text boxes. And I'm going to put a universal legend at the top. And that is just a case of, again, drawing a couple of shapes. So I'm going to go back into shapes, down to rectangle, and I'm going to draw just a couple of shapes. And I'm going to change this color to the darker one. And I'm going to say no outline. And I'm going to duplicate this shape. So you can do that in a couple of ways. Control D is the shortcut key to duplicate an object, but you could also hold down your Control key and just drag, and that will duplicate the object. I'm going to change the color of this one to the lighter blue for the other store. And now I'm going to add some text boxes. So I'm going to go to Insert, across to Text and Text Box. And I'm going to draw my text box. I can't remember which way around these were. Actually, I think this one was Computech. And again, I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to do a Control D this time. And this one was Micro World. And again, you can resize these, make them look a little bit neater. And I actually want to get rid of the fill on these as well. So I'm going to go to Shape Fill, and I'm going to say No Fill. And I'm going to make that text white as well. And the same for this one. So Format, No Fill, and make the text. Oops, clicked in the wrong thing. Make that text white again. And then, I think I need to remove the outline as well. So outline, no outline. As you can see, this can be a little bit fiddly. There we go. So now I can move these up, and essentially what I've created there is a universal legend which applies to all of the charts. So it means that you can get rid of any legends that you have on your individual charts, which makes it look less busy. It's a lot cleaner. You don't really need them there if you have a universal legend. Okay, so we're getting there. It's looking pretty good. Now, a couple of other stylistic things that you might want to do, and really, again, this is all personal preference, but I want to try and show you as many things as I can, which can make it really visually engaging. So I'm going to utilize a new feature. And when I say new, I think these came in 2016 version. They might have been there in 2013. I think it possibly was 2016. But in the illustrations group, we now have an icons button. And I love icons. And actually, before I go into there, I'm going to click on my Sales by Manager. So let's click on icons again. And this is just icons which you can add into your spreadsheets just to kind of make everything a little bit more visual. So this chart is Sales by Manager. So I might want to go down and choose an icon which represents that nicely. And as I said, you can choose any of these. Let's take a little look. I'm going to add, what should we add? Let's just add this one just here. I'm going to click Insert. And you can see it's added this icon. It's currently black, but the thing I like about these icons is that they're completely customizable. So you can see now I have a graphics tools option or ribbon at the top, and I can change the fill to white, and I can resize that one. And you can place these wherever you like. So I might want to place it just above where I have all my manager names. I'll add a couple more. So Sales by Store, we're going to go to Insert, Icons. And what shall we add for this one? By Store, let's do some apparel. Insert, I'm going to change it to white. Resize it. And again, you can move it to wherever you like. And then finally, let's just do one more. Sales by Category. Insert icon, and let's just do this one just here. Change the fill to white, make it a bit smaller, and you can spend a lot more time doing this than I am just here, but hopefully you get the idea. It's just making it a lot more interesting to look at, a lot more visually engaging just by using some of the features within Excel. So I pretty much have everything looking pretty good. The next thing I want to do is I want to add in these slicers. And let's refer back to our example again. And you can see that we're kind of looking fairly similar to our example, but we just need to add in these little filters or slicers on the side. So let's go back to our dashboard. Now, really important, to add these in, you want to make sure that you're clicked on one of your charts. It doesn't matter which one, you just need to click on one of them. You then go up to your pivot chart tools, and under the Analyze ribbon, you have an option for Insert Slicer. And what this will do is it will present you with a list of, again, all of your column headings from your data. So I have month, store, town, so on and so forth. And it really depends what you want to use to control your dashboard. And you can have multiple slicers. You can have as many as you like. We're going to add in 3. So I want to be able to filter my data by store, town, and manager. And I'm going to click on OK. And it gives me these little panels, which I'm now going to move over into this little area that I created for them. And I'm going to resize them and just tidy them up. So there we have store. I then can put town underneath. I'm going to resize that. And then I'm going to put my manager one underneath that. Scroll down a little bit more. like so. Now, currently, these slicers don't really match my dashboard, but the beauty is you can click on one of them and you get a ribbon at the top that says Slicer Tools. So you can control lots of things on Slicer Tools, and one of them is the color. So again, you can go in and pick a color more suitable for whatever theme or colors you've chosen for your overall design. So I'm just going to change mine to blue. Once I've done that, I don't really need this blue placeholder that I put in there, so I can just highlight that shape and delete it out. Now, another thing I might want to do here is with this town slicer, I have a lot of options in my town slicer. I might want to display those in a bit of a different way. So if I go up to my Slicer Tools options, you can see here it says in this buttons group, we have columns 1. So currently I'm just getting one item listed underneath each other. If I change that to 2, I get more options. I could go up to 3. So it really depends sort of how much space you want them to take up. So I'm going to say 2 because I think that's a little bit easier for people to see. Now with these slicers basically control what you see on your dashboard. But you'll see what happens if I click on, so if I use this store one and just click on Computech, when I click on it, I want you to watch what happens to this sales by manager chart. So I click on Computech and you can see it's adjusted that information. If I click on MicroWorld, it's adjusted that information, but it's only adjusting it for this first chart. And that's because this was the chart I was clicked on when I inserted these slicers. So what you need to do is basically go in and tell your slicer which charts you want it to control. So in this case, I want every slicer to control every chart in my dashboard. So let me clear my filter. So with the store, I'm currently clicked on MicroWorld, which is essentially a filter. I'm going to click on this little cross just to clear it and put everything back again. And I'm now going to go through and attach this slicer to all of my charts. And I do that by right-clicking and selecting Report Connections. And what this will show you is exactly which charts this particular slicer is controlling. So at the moment, it's only controlling sales by manager. So I just want to put a tick in the rest of the boxes. Now, unfortunately, you can't do this all in one go. You have to go onto each slicer and attach to all of the charts you want it to control. And let's do it for the final one. And select like so. All right, so now we have everything connected. You'll notice that if I start selecting items, and let me scroll down a little bit, if I select London, you should see all of the charts will change. Okay, and if you want to select more options, you can hold down your control key and select more options. And it just makes it a really nice interactive way for people to go in and be able to pull out exactly the information that they want. You know, I might only be interested in the sales for MicroWorld in London for a particular manager. Okay, so Frank, for example. And that will show me that information. Just remember to clear your filters once you're finished with them. And there you go. You've basically created your first interactive dashboard. I think that looks pretty cool. And as I said, you can really go to town with this. There's loads of different things you can display on dashboards, but hopefully this gives you sort of more of an understanding as to how it all works and why you might want to do it. There is one final thing I want to show you before we open up for questions, and that is updating. So, have I cleared all my filters? I have, yes. If I want to update this information, so currently I'm showing all the sales information from January to June 2017. Now in July, I'm going to have more sales information and I'm going to want that to be added into all of my charts and I want everything to update. So you might be thinking, well, that sounds a bit horrendous if I have to go in and manually do it. You don't. I'm going to show you a really simple way of doing it. So I'm going to go back to my data, my original data source. And what you'll see at the bottom here is I have another tab that says data for July. So this is my sales data for next month, for July. All I need to do is click in the data. I'm going to highlight it all by pressing Control A, and I'm going to copy it. Control C. I'm going to go back to my original data, and I'm going to jump all the way down to the bottom. So a quick way of doing that is holding down the Control key and your down arrow, and that will jump you to the bottom. I'm then just going to paste in my new data, so Control V, and that's going to paste that July data into the bottom. Now I can see there it's also pasted the heading row, so I can just go in and delete that out. Now what you might have noticed is that the new data has automatically become part of this table, and that is why it's so important that you set up your data in a table initially, because any new data that you add will automatically become part of that sales data range, essentially. And because all of our pivot tables have been created based on the range sales data, it means that this new data is now included in that. So all we have to do is, once we've added in the data, is go back to our dashboard, and we just need to refresh. So we just click on any chart, go up to the Analyze ribbon, and we have a refresh button in here. Now I want to show you this on one that's fairly easy to see. So sales by month, if I click down here, you can see here the last column, or the last data that we have, is June. When I click refresh, you should see this update to include July data. So let me click refresh, refresh all. And there we go. July data has been added with one click of a button. So you just have to copy it back in and refresh, and that is it. That is basically it, guys. That is everything I wanted to show you. I know we went through fairly quickly, and it is quite a lot to take in if this is the first time you're building a dashboard and putting things together, even if it's the first time that you've maybe seen a pivot table. So what I would say to you is go back through the recording, use the practice file that we've sent through, and have a go at it yourself. And once you kind of understand the concepts, you can really start to think to yourself, right, how can I create my own style of dashboards? As I said, you can design these in whatever way you want, and there are some amazing ones out there. Hopefully that was interesting and informative for you. I'm going to open it up to some questions now. So if anybody has any questions, I can't see the chat panel. So Adam, if you can see any questions, could you just feed those through to me, if that's all right?
Yes, certainly. We've got one from Jean. She asked, while you were doing the months, I can't remember which
sales
graph it was in.
Yep.
Sales by month, that is the one.
Yep.
How did you get months rather than just months? So can you just go through that pivot table data quickly for us?
How did I get the months here?
So yeah, you had two options, month and months.
Yes.
So you just go through how that worked quickly.
Okay, let me bring back field list. Right, if I take that out. Now, all I did was I grabbed month and I dragged it down to rows. And what the pivot table automatically does is it recognizes that within my data, so if I look in my data here for January, okay, I have, if I go back up to the top, data here for January is the only data I have is for the 1st of January. Okay, so this is basically all my data for the 1st of January. It then moves on to the 1st of February. So this data is essentially a snapshot that's done on the 1st of every month. Okay, so basically it recognizes, if we go back to sales by month, when I drag month down here, it recognizes that there is a date within January, which is the 1st of January. For February, 1st of February, because I only have data for the 1st of January. So it gives me those options. I could choose to just display 1st of January if I wanted to, but I actually just want the months. I'm not interested in the breakdown, which in this case is the same anyway, because there's only one day for each month. So all I did was I removed the month one, which then got rid of those sort of 1st of January, 1st of Feb, and just left me with the month.
Am I right in thinking that's so that happens automatically, but I don't think it did happen automatically in older versions of Excel. Is that
it's actually
correct?
a setting. It's a setting. So
right,
I'm trying to remember now. I think it's in pivot table options.
So yeah, if that didn't happen
here
for you, Jean, it might just be that your setting is off, or you're using. Because I know I've when I started using pivot tables, that didn't happen, and then when I started using a newer version of Excel, all of a sudden that did start to happen.
Yes, it is definitely a setting that's in here. I can't remember off the top of my head where it is, but there's a setting which says if you right click, and it's either in field settings or pivot table options. I can't remember where
It will
it
give
is.
the breakdown.
Yeah, I can't remember where it is, but it'll say to you, like, do you want to drag? So if you drag month, do you want to drag all the individual items, or do you just want to drag the month? You can, it's a setting that you can customize. So if it's not happening for you, then it will be a setting. I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly where it is off the top of my head. It's in the pivot table settings somewhere.
That's fine. We've got a good question from Perry, which is, what is the best way to share the dashboard? And I've got a couple of experiences I can draw on here as well if needs be.
Please feel free. Go on, Adam. If you got a live real world example, then I'll hand over to you.
I've experienced this in the past where I've actually tried to share an interactive dashboard like that, and it works fine, providing that the recipient has an up-to-date version of Excel or a similar version to what you're working. Now, I'm pretty sure post 2013, it's all backwards compatible, so it would work fine. If they're in a very old version, it won't. So, Perry, you can just share the entire thing. What you can do as well is you can actually lock some of the elements or sheets in the workbook, so that people don't mess with your raw data, basically, or they have to put a password in to mess with it.
Protect sheet,
using protect sheet, where they can still interact with and see the dashboard. And then another way that I've used, which is maybe a bit of a hack, but is actually to to sort of select whatever that person wants to see. So use the slicers and the filters to select the visual that they're after on the main dashboard, and then actually just export that page as a PDF. And it will, because of the design, it will look really lovely. And obviously a PDF can be viewed on any device, whether you've got Excel or whatever. So that's quite a nice sort of hack around it, I guess, to almost print off your dashboards and show them to people. Obviously, you lose the interactive element, but
that's a really good point. And I would agree with that. So it's going to depend on the version of the people that you're sharing with, because some of these elements that we've used aren't necessarily available in older versions. So then they might have some problems. For example, slicers aren't available pre-2010. So, if you're sharing with someone who has an older version, they're not going to be able to use the slicers. Icons are available from, I think, 2016 onwards, just little things like that. But if you're sharing with someone within your organization and you all use the same version, you can just share the spreadsheet and it should work absolutely fine. Just to elaborate a little bit on what Adam was saying about locking worksheets and things like that, which is a really good point. So sometimes you might want people to be able to just see the dashboard and interact with it, and without seeing all of your workings out down here. What you can do is you can right click and protect the sheets, which stops people changing the data. And you could then also hide those worksheets so they don't actually see them. They only see the dashboard instead of, seeing all of these sheets as well. So that would be another way that you could do that.
Yeah, hiding's a top tip as well. If people can't see it, they can't ruin it.
Just to remove it.
Yeah, exactly. We don't have any other questions in the comments box, so do drop any in now. And if not, there's just a couple of things that I wanted to run by everybody, and that is our future webinars. So we're going to do one in November, which is going to be the part 2 of the Microsoft Project webinar that we held last month. So how to create your first project in Microsoft Project. And then for next year, we've got a few ideas. We're thinking of doing one on logical functions in Excel, one on creating amazing presentations in PowerPoint, which I think could be pretty useful to a lot of people, and one that sort of links into this, which is looking at power pivots and connecting external data. So in theory, you could not have your data coming out of this Excel file. You could have it coming from an Access database or a SQL database, or a different spreadsheet, if you like, and you could connect it to dashboard via your via the Power Pivots function, which is a hugely powerful function. Clues in the name. So yeah, we're thinking of that. So if they sound good, let us know. If there's anything else you'd like to see, then let us know that as well.
We're always open to if there's something you want to see, just let us know.
Yeah, and if you can't think of anything right now, just sort of drop us a line, support@simonsayisit.com, and I'll make sure we pick those up. Great, thanks, Deb. So I'll make sure the recording is up on the blog, and I'll email around the link with the downloadable exercises as well, so everyone can see that. And unless there are any other questions, we'll call it it's an evening here, so we'll call it an evening.
Lovely. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for attending. I hope you found it useful. I can see the chat comments now. So tell me if you found it useful. Give me a thumbs up or a yes or something. Or if you didn't, you don't have to.
That's like
it was awful.
Feedback
You
as well.
Tell me.
Yeah,
oh, thank you, Pat.
And no, I didn't see any issues with the webinar software, which is great news. So this is new software that we've bought in, and for me it worked perfectly. So hopefully it did for you as well. We're going to be continuing with this rather than the old one from now on.
I had no issues, so it's good.
Fabulous. Right, thanks ever so much, everyone. We'll leave it there, and we will see you all soon.
Lovely. Thanks, guys. See you later.
Bye, Pat. Thanks.
Bye.